Good evening and welcome to A Moment with Dr. Kramer. Today I will be coming out of Matthew chapter 6, and we will begin at verse 30. The topic will be never lose focus. Never lose focus. So, verse 30 reads, "And the apostles gathered themselves together unto Jesus and told him all things, both what they had done and what they had taught. And he said unto them, Come ye yourselves apart into a desert place and rest a while. For there were many coming and going, and they had no leisure as much as to eat." So the disciples were excited about the word of God, so much so that them eating didn't even matter because they were excited about the word. Let's see what happens. "And they departed into a desert place by ship privately." Verse 33, "And the people saw them departing, and many knew him and ran afoot thither out of all cities and came out and gathered together unto him." So Jesus and the disciples were in this place. They thought a private place, but people were excited about Jesus being there. So they gathered where he was. 34. "And when Jesus, when he came out and saw much people, he was moved with compassion toward them, because they were as sheep not having a shepherd. And he began to teach them many things." So let's remember in this time period that yes, there were teachers. There were people who had their own mind and they had their own things that they wanted to accomplish. But Jesus knew that this group of people needed to be shepherded. They needed to be taught what it was to be a follower of God. 35. "And when the day was now far spent, his disciples came unto him and said, This is a desert place. Now the time is far past. Send them away, that they may go into the country round about and into the villages and buy themselves bread, for they have nothing to eat." Now, mind you, earlier in verse 30, the disciples were excited about the things that they had taught and the things that they had done. Now that they're in a place of ministry, it seems that their focus have shifted. Jesus has taught these new sheep, and the disciples are tired. They want them to go away. So the excuse is, let the people go and get something to eat. Something happened with their focus. Let's not forget that. Something happened with their focus. So as we read down, we see the miracle of feeding the 5,000. So they found these 5 loaves and 2 fishes, and all these people were able to sit down and eat. So we take that from verses 37 down to 44 was the miracle of feeding 5,000 men, and that did not include the women and children, right? So the men were able to go and sit down and in their companies and be fed. The disciples were fed, and what was left over with the scraps, they gathered them back up in baskets, and they were still able to feed more people. Now, who wouldn't be thrilled or even maybe consumed by this miracle that just took place. But let's see what happened in verse 45. And straightway he constrained his disciples to get into the ship and go to the other side before unto Bethesda, while he sent away the people. So Jesus never lost sight of what he was doing. He never lost sight of the people that he was there to minister to. The disciples gladly went back on the boat because they lost focus as to what their first duty was, and they were ready to be done. They were ready to go home. They were ready to go some other place than this place of ministry. They lost focus on the fact that Jesus was there shepherding his flock. They lost sight of that. So in verse 46, remember Mark 6, verse 46. And when he had sent them away, he departed into a mountain to pray. Now, wouldn't you think that Jesus' disciples would go and pray with him? Wouldn't you think that they had just done this miraculous work, they had taught, they saw things, and they were excited about what they had done. But even when it was time to pray with the master, he prayed by himself. The disciples were not there. So, verse 47. And when evening was come, the ship in the midst of the sea, and he alone on the land. So the disciples were already adrift from ashore. They were in the sea. Jesus was on the land. And when he saw them toiling and rowing, for the wind was contrary unto them, and about the fourth watch of night, he comes unto them. So Jesus watched them struggle a little bit. And then walking upon the sea, and would have passed by them. But when they saw him walking upon the sea, they supposed it had been a spirit and cried out. Now, wouldn't you think that Jesus' disciples would have known and recognized who he was? Even on the sea, they knew that they left him on the land back there. And they were in the sea now. And they didn't know who he was. They lost focus. For they all saw him and were troubled. And immediately he talked with them and saith unto them, Be of good cheer. It is I. Be not afraid. These were Jesus's people. They were his boys. And they didn't know who he was. When he came to rescue them from their struggle, they still didn't even recognize who he was until he spoke to them. 51. And he went up unto them into the ship, and the wind ceased, and they were so amazed in themselves beyond measure and wonder. Listen to this. For they considered not the miracle of the loaves, for their heart was hardened. How could your heart be hardened from the miracle of being in fellowship with Jesus? You know, sometimes even in our own lives, you may get tired of hearing people teach or preach about the word, and you start to take it for granted. You forget about the people who are out there who may be lost, or the people that needed to be shepherded. But most importantly, they forgot about the miracle of the loaves and the fish. This was something huge. This was something that should have been talked about for days to come. But they lost focus of what their requirement was. They lost focus on what the purpose of their ministry was. They even lost focus of who Jesus was. So in our walk, we have to be careful that we don't lose focus, that we always remember and that we always appreciate the miracles of what Jesus had done. We don't want to be in a place where our hearts are hardened and we can't hear or appreciate what God is doing. So let us not be weary in well-doing. Let us not forget the miracles of even salvation that Jesus has given us. Let us not lose focus as we're going by day to day. Let us not lose focus on the Word of God. Let us not lose focus on the things that God has prepared for His people. We are not here for ourselves. We are here to be living examples for those around us. So my prayer today is that you remember who you are and that you remember to always stay mindful of the things of God and that you don't lose focus. God bless.